to mention Lega, led by Matteo Salvini, was one of the two parties of that government that signed the Belt and Road Agreement 2 years ago. So they are a little less vocal and a little less effective in their work. By the way, it was them that put in the government and undersecretary to the international trade a man who is absolutely pleading for China all the time. He even had in his staff in the ministry a woman who was a Chinese citizen, couldn't speak Italian, but she was official. You know, you could go to the website of the ministry and you would find that. So the challenge is a big one. The presence of China is strong, even openly, and then there is all that is going under, not so visible, but it is there. But there is a increasing awareness of this danger. We were able to stop an agreement from the government with Huawei for the 5G, and several other things were going that way. And by the way, the fact that Adolfo Urso is the chairman of the committee, it was not easy. It was not easy to get him in that position because, of course, there were strong interests not only related to China, mainly related to other issues, but it was not easy to have him there. The law says that the chairmanship of that committee, the Committee about Secret Services, the Information Services, is to be given to the opposition. But the opposition, by definition, has not the majority. So it was not easy to enforce that law. But at the end of the day, we made it. And thanks also to Adolfo, we have been able to stop several moves that would have endangered our security and even more than they already are, because I believe that we are quite under the eye of the Chinese information services.
Grazie mille. Thank you very much. Another approach that's been taken on not only with regard to China, but with regard to Russia, is the question of Magnitsky-like legislation. And how that type of legislation can be employed to help gain some leverage. And I would like to go to Silviu Serban, if you might, to talk a little bit about where that process stands in Romania.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm Silviu Serban from Romania. We're the third party in the government alliance. We were. Actually, tomorrow we'll hear about that. My two colleagues are here and they're laughing, but that's how things are for the moment. But let's go back to the National Magnitsky Act. So our colleague tried in 2019 to promote the National Magnitsky Act, and it was rejected by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it was left there, and we just found it. We started, so it's for us. It's the first year in the Parliament. Actually, the first 9 months, but okay. So we're pretty new. We found it, we rewrote it in order to comply with the regulation, the constitutional regulations, because the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said something about some regulations there. And we added a feature of sanctioning acts of corruption with major impacts, starting from the UN principles. I think in March it went on the Parliament, and because we are new and young and we don't actually understand how things are going with the lobby and talking with all the parts that are involved in promoting this bill, we got another rejection from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs with exactly the same specification, and in 2019. So in April, I think, we contacted Bill Broden. We had a short discussion with him. So now we're trying to put it again in the Parliament. I don't know exactly with which help. I think with the with my two colleagues from here and with all the international friends who can help us in making more lobby and talking with the foreign affairs from Romania. So this is where we are for the moment. We strongly believe that we need a national Magnitsky Act because we can provide a flexible legal framework for enforcing the restrictive measures. And especially for the ones, the cases where the order of magnitude needed to get European attentions, it's not there. And let's be honest, usually in the European level, you don't get the 27 votes for most of them, of the restrictions that we want. So, and we also need a framework for quick and efficient solutions for cross-border human trafficking and freezing the access and the resources of things from such illegal acts. So this is our idea. We're going to start it again, I think, in November or late or beginning of December. So any help that you can give us, thank you very much.
Mulțumesc, thank you. And thank you to so many members of the Romanian Parliament for being here, which will take as demonstration of your commitment to this issue, given the complexity of the situation back in Bucharest. So, mulțumesc and köszönöm szépen. We'll go to Luke for maybe just a quick view of what's going on inside the British Parliament, and then we'll open it up to those of you who haven't had a chance yet to intervene, and we'll plan to go to Dan Twining back in Washington for closing remarks at about 18:10.
Thank you very much, Jan. It's good to be among friends. I am not speaking on behalf of IPAC or any political party here. I'll just give you my overview of how things are in the UK Parliament. It's a bit of a mess, to be honest. I mean, we were doing okay, pushing loads of different campaigns down the road. We have developed, I think, an overwhelming majority cross-party in favour of a more sceptical approach. That is not mirrored by the UK government, so things have become quite hard. I'll give you an example. After sanctions were imposed upon parliamentarians in the UK for the actions that we were pushing forward, there was a huge chilling effect. So in January, in response to the genocide amendment, which we were running to the trade bill, which was a cross-party initiative, the government announced that there would be export controls to the Uyghur region, and there would be an urgent review, they said. And they also said that there would be changes to the Modern Slavery Act to try to scrutinise imports from that area. The sanctions were imposed pretty soon afterwards, and then none of that stuff happened, which gives you an indication about where the government is. They are, the rumour is, very spooked by the notion that there can be reciprocal, coercive stuff happening to parliamentarians, but actually to the government more broadly. And they're worried about what it says about the state of the bilateral relationship. So in summary, David Cameron and George Osborne's golden era of relations between the UK and China is deeply embedded within the civil service. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. I would describe us at the moment as sort of trying to pull its grip away. It's still very much holding on. And I think one of the proponents of that is our Prime Minister. So on the parliamentary side, we're in a pretty good place, to be honest. I think people appreciate what it is they need to do. But that is not reflected by the civil service and government or the Foreign Office, and that's creating real difficulty.
Thanks, Luke. George, I assume you to be in Bucharest. It looks like a parliamentary office, and I think you'd like to offer something as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this opportunity to engage in the discussion today, and also for raising such a complex subject. Our democratic societies and systems rely strictly on respect for the fundamental human rights and liberties. The EU and its member states, along with the United States, like-minded partners, will continue to hold these values at the core of our foreign policy and approach to relate with third countries. Authoritarian states definitely represent a growing and dangerous threat to the democracy, also challenging the security and integrity of Western states, their beliefs and their way of life. This is the reality of a multipolar world we are living today, where threats such as authoritarianism should, however, be addressed constructively. We must embrace critical thinking, a constructive, careful, goal-directed approach as an ongoing policy and narrative in defining our positioning towards authoritarian coercion. I will provide an example of China definition from the EU and China strategic outlook. The document states that Beijing is a partner, a competitor, and a systemic rival. This remaining a valid description of the 360 degrees approach that is needed when currently engaging China. As liberal democracies, we must also respond urgently and, as at the table said, collectively, to defeat, against, deter and counter the challenges to our values. The key to an effective joint response in a solid transatlantic relation, we welcome the current US administration commitment to working with the EU, NATO, and like-minded partners in Asia. We need the strength, our allied resilience, including the critical infrastructure, interconnectivity, energy projects in our region. We see an important potential of tackling those challenges in regional cooperation formats that includes Romania, Poland, and the United States and partners, such as 3C initiatives, Bucharest 9. Romania foreign policy is robustly anchored on those principles as part of the EU and NATO and as a strategic partners of the United States and as a member of democratic international community committed to the preservation of the international rule-based order. Therefore, we think that national parliaments play an important role in closely monitoring the democratic track record of government action in compliance with international commitments in upholding human rights. We will keep an ongoing process of consultation in our national executive on the best way forward in relation with foreign partners. Our action should rely on solidarity with our fellow members of national parliaments, of the European Parliament, with representatives from academia, think tanks, and civil society who are unfairly sanctioned for expressing their free voice. I think in the end, we need to remain resolute in maintaining unity and solidarity among like-minded countries and parliaments. Thank you very much, and once again, the Romania situation and agenda keeps me in Bucharest in the parliamentary office, but I think I have few of my friends there, and I wish you a good discussion there, though.
Thank you, George. Much appreciated. I had the feeling at various points today that there were more members of the Romanian Parliament here than there are back at Bucharest, but no matter. Thanks to all of you.
Only from the running party.
It's complicated, right? If I could, to go back to the starting point of the discussion before we turn it over to Dan Twining. Žygis, we started with the question of how we can support Lithuania in the decisions that it's taken, specifically with regard to Taiwan. And I just wanted to let you know that we at IRI, following up on that, and my colleague Jason here and his team that works on these issues here in Warsaw, have developed a joint statement working together with the EPP, ALDE, and the ECR. And we hope to release that in the next 24 to 48 hours, saying exactly that, that those three parliamentary groups at the EU level are supportive of what has been done up in Vilnius. So little things like that. I understand that not one statement changes the world, but still, just so you know, that there are people out there who are on your side in the steps that you've taken. So maybe just one more chance for anybody at the table who'd like to have an opportunity. Dan, before we come over to you. Andre.
Dear colleagues, thank you for the floor. As Slovenian deputy and a member of the coalition, others expect to be very neutral. Although we should not be silent on such a topic, I hope a very clear and above all achievable goals will be set during our Slovenian presidency. For conclusion, I would like to repeat the words of our Prime Minister, Mr. Janša, in his letter on the 15th of September. He said, firstly, we will be able to face China successfully only with a united, coherent and common approach. Secondly, we must stand by every EU member state that is facing pressure. And not the least, Taiwan remains our important partner. This should not be denied. This is my short conclusion. And last, to my colleague, one remark to my colleague Lucio about regarding Trieste port. Port in Koper in Slovenia is very corporate and always looking for opportunity to grow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andre. And I actually am going to get Janša's letter framed and put on my wall because the day I got it, I thought, you can always count on Janis Janša to come through on these issues. So thank you. Najlepša hvala. All right, great. Thank you all for what I hope was a valuable discussion for everyone. And to wrap us up now, we're going to go off to Washington to IRI President Dan Twining. Thanks, Dan.
Yes, hi. Thanks, Jan. What an excellent conversation. Thanks to all of you there, including our friends who are members of parliament, including our various senior experts, including our excellent IRI team. Our IRI board of directors sees this work, frankly, for democracies to come together to build resilience against foreign malign influence as really the central task for our institute, and that's particularly true with regard to China, just given the scale and scope of the danger that it poses to all three societies in its current incarnation under this very aggressive CCP leadership. Maybe just to sum up, Jan, 4 quick points. The first is just for us to understand very clearly what we're grappling with, as I know you all clearly do, based on the discussion of the last hour and change. Chinese strategy is to co-opt elites in all of our societies, to divide us from ourselves, to lead us to self-censor in terms of our own criticisms of the nature of the Chinese Communist Party, as referenced by the Italian media conversation, among many others. They pursue a form of military-civil fusion, which means trade, infrastructure, investment ties are not done with Chinese private companies alone. It is not a private sector to private sector engagement, because the Chinese government and the party state lurks there within every deal, and the Chinese see these deals, particularly in Europe, as highly strategic, and they are playing a long game, as our Hungarian colleague observed, with the 100-year lease. The Chinese strategy is to cause small d Democrats to doubt ourselves and to be confused amongst ourselves, right? So they say, oh no, we have Chinese-style democracy. It's different from your democracy, but it's also democracy, right? Or they say Hong Kong is our affair, it's not your affair. Or they say Asians or Chinese societies do not want democratic values, free rights, human liberties. We heard very compellingly from our distinguished Taiwanese colleagues today, we know that's not the case. There's nothing Western about these values, these precepts. They are universal, and some of the most successful, free and prosperous societies in the world are in Asia. This is something that worries the Chinese Communist Party leadership, because, of course, they don't want the kind of free debates and open inquiry and free association that we see so vividly on display in places like Taiwan, they don't want that in China because it would threaten their hold on power. Fundamentally, Chinese strategy is to win without fighting. Yes, we're very worried about Chinese military and aircraft maneuvers around Taiwan, as we discussed earlier. If the Chinese need to go to war, they will not have succeeded. They will also lose. Their strategy is to divide us amongst ourselves, to penetrate our societies and our elites and our economies in such a way as they will gain inordinate leverage to accomplish their own objectives without fighting. And that is what we need to be wary about. Point two is this need to modernize alliances. Our transatlantic community has a very sophisticated defense infrastructure that has been gathered, that has been developed and nurtured and strengthened over 75 years. But we don't have the same infrastructure around protecting our political integrity, as we've seen from foreign malign influence attacks on so many of our free societies. We don't have the same defenses in place around information flows in the digital domain, in cyber. We certainly don't have the architecture that we have around, say, the NATO alliance. We don't have that architecture in the economic domain, which allows China to use economic leverage and co-optation to divide Europe within, as we've seen in the conversation around the 17+1, and kudos to Lithuania for calling it as it sees it. So part of what we need to do is develop new constellations, new forms of security collaboration that are not focused on repelling a Russian tank invasion, but that are focused on protecting our free and open societies from malign assault and co-optation and penetration by foreign actors, including the Chinese Communist Party. Point three, this should be very flattering to all of our European colleagues. Europe is the prize for China. Yes, there's a lot of Belt and Road focus on the developing world. In fact, however, the Chinese see Europe as the seatbed of advanced technologies and deep, deep pools of capital. And they understand that if Europe should swing away from the United States and Europe should be divided within, that China can act as predator in Europe in terms of securing access to advanced technologies, in terms of securing very strategic port infrastructure, in terms of co-opting European elites in ways that undermine both the Transatlantic alliance and undermine European solidarity. We've seen so many examples of this. So I do think it's worth reflecting for our European friends that the Chinese are targeting you very directly. They are targeting your societies, your political and economic elites, and your assets. And it is very important for this group, which totally gets it, to help other friends in Europe who may not be as clear-eyed to understand what game is being played. And if you don't realize you're in a game, then you're the prey and not the predator. Finally, last point, is just the importance, the essential urgency of Western and democratic solidarity. Democracies need to protect ourselves, and the best way to protect ourselves is to work together. We are uniquely vulnerable as open societies to malign forms of Chinese influence, but we also have a unique ability to form alliances and ententes and partnerships to protect ourselves, our freedoms, our free societies. That includes in the economic domain. We should not be protectionist, but of course we must be much more clear-eyed about the nature of Chinese trade and investment deals, including with the EU, and including Chinese deals within nations, and understand, again, this fusion of the Chinese party state with Chinese corporations and private sector actors, that what the Chinese are doing is highly strategic, and we need to protect our economies from predation. We need to protect the free and open internet and the information domain in all of our societies. That's much better accomplished by working together. We need to work much more closely within international institutions, which the Chinese Communist Party is attempting very aggressively to co-opt and neutralize in various ways. They are not attempting to take them over or seek hegemony at the United Nations or in any of its agencies, but what they are trying to do is essentially neutralize any conversation around free and open democratic values, including in how we regulate the internet, including in many domains, how we think about peace and conflict and sovereignty. And as free and open societies, we must work together to protect these international institutions and make sure they have a bias towards democracies and towards freedom. Finally, of course, we must support Taiwan, and we can learn from Taiwan Taiwan is a leader in countering disinformation, in upholding electoral integrity in the face of an enormous foreign-oriented, foreign-engineered campaign to overthrow its own free and fair elections by undermining the will of Taiwanese voters. We must support Taiwan. It is a strength for us as free nations to have Taiwan as a partner and ally. It's not some kind of liability. It's an extraordinary strength. Similarly, we should support Lithuania, both within the European context and more broadly. Lithuania, another country that understands very clearly what it's like to have a foreign malign actor attempt to distort its politics and run very sophisticated influence operations in its country. This is happening in many countries. But I think history will remember Taiwan and Lithuania in different ways as these nations that really are frontline of this new 21st century struggle, which is not going to look like the Cold War. It's going to look totally different. But that together, we can prevail and protect free societies, and we can go on offense to remind not just our citizens, but citizens in China and around the world that it is democratic institutions and open debate and free speech and free and fair elections that is the guarantor of legitimacy. It is not power or wealth. It is not the brittle one-man rule of the Chinese Communist Party. It is not the, quote, development miracle that China has somehow engineered. There's a much greater set of development miracles in Taiwan and South Korea and Japan and in Europe itself, all of which are much, much richer than China. So let's remember that we are stronger together and that we have a lot to play for and a lot to defend. And ultimately, I'm optimistic. Thank you, Jan. Thanks for everyone. It's great to be with you here today at the Warsaw Security Forum.
Thank you, Dan. Much appreciated. It remains to me to do a series of thank yous for what I hope and believe has been an excellent day. First of all, to our participants from Taiwan, I think it's already tomorrow there. So we very much appreciate you staying up and staying with us. And we, of course, are thinking about you all the time. To the other participants in the room, listen, we fully understand that, particularly for the elected members among you, but for all of us, right, there are other places we could be, there are other things we could be doing. And we value the fact that you all decided to be with us today and for the next several days, for those of you who are staying at the Warsaw Security Forum. I personally want to say thank you, Dan, Scott, to the front office and the leadership at IRI for their support of this kind of work. It's not self-evident. This is we're branching out into new territory here, and we have always in this work felt your support from the front office and from the board and from the funder, which in this case is the National Endowment for Democracy in Washington. We are grateful to them as well. None of it, of course, would be possible without really excellent expertise that is brought to us by other parts of IRI. So Matt, to you and your colleagues in the Center for Global Impact at IRI, thank you for taking the time to come over. Reka, thank you for all of your support in putting people together in the room. And last but by no means least, to the team here in Warsaw. Now I have to do a little explanation of an acronym for you as a way of closing this up. This program in the bureaucracy back in Washington is called Bolstering Europe Against the Subversive Tactics of the CCP. And if you put that down on paper, you will see immediately that the acronym is BEAST. So we like to call the team here in Warsaw, although they are not all male, the Beastie Boys. Those of you who have an appreciation for music will, I think, value that. To the Beastie Boys and the lead Beastie Boy, Jason, Jack, David, Sabina, Amina, Brianna, and all of the other folks that helped bring us all here together today. If we could have a round of applause for them. We look forward to staying in touch and working together. And as I said, now that we've lost our folks in virtual land, for those of you who are here in person, physically, celebration of 30 years of IRI work here in Poland, starting in
35 minutes.
Thank you. Appreciate it, everybody.
we'll meet downstairs at say 5 minutes to 7. Look for someone pretty with a IRI lapel pin, and we will get you over to the reception.